Okay, if everyone's ready, I'm turning the recorder on. Hello, it is 1:05 p.m. Today is Friday, October 4th, 2024. This is a joint work session between the Town Council of Bluff and Bluff Planning and Zoning Commissioners. Let's start with roll call. We'll start with Planning and Zoning.
This is Amanda Podmore, Chair.
Brian Whitney.
Marcia Hadenfeldt.
Ed Dobson.
And we have an excused absence for Malia Collins.
Council. Roll call.
Luanne, Jennifer Davila.
And Leppanen. Linda Sosa is not here. She will be in sometime in the next probably 15 minutes. Her absence right now is excused. And Britt Hornsby's absence is excused as well.
Erin Nelson serving as town manager.
Well, thanks everyone for agreeing to a joint session. I think that we all are in agreement that when planning and zoning works on a document, it saves us a lot of time and angst in the long run to try to get back together versus ping-ponging issues or questions. So am I echoing? Somebody is, okay.
He's just putting the.
All right, so the first thing is the discussion of the drafted RV ordinance. You know, we didn't talk about really how to manage today. I'm wondering if it would be best to just kind of kick this to the planning and zoning commissioners to kind of talk about the philosophy behind it or things that you need to highlight.
Okay, great. So I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Marcia if that's okay, because Marcia and Malia were the amazing brains behind drafting this. But we came to the idea of doing an RV ordinance first because of concerns about a lot of potential like RVs being noticed around town, or maybe makeshift RV parks being in town, and wanting to make sure we had regulations for RV parks, that we looked at what zones they're allowed in, that we looked at maybe different size RV parks that could be allowed and where. And so we took those sort of overarching ideas, looked at consider things like public safety, impact in like residential and commercial zones, and also things like the need for economic development and affordable housing in the town. And so we then organized all this into an ordinance. Marcia, do you want to sort of?
Sure. Thank you, Amanda. Taking it from there, Malia and I took an ordinance from somewhere else, or use a template of an ordinance from somewhere to hone it into one that would work for Bluff, to include what the overall elements that Amanda just described. And then there is the discussion of uses. So the first part of it basically talks about obviously the purpose of the purpose of the ordinance and the definitions for the terms of the ordinance, and then gets into the specifics. And the first part tends to generally deal with just RVs themselves, and the rest of it deals with RV and or mobile home parks. One of the things we did, much as Amanda has laid out, is just to decide some of the places you could do these things, use these things, park these things, and the ways that would contribute to economic growth and housing, and of course recreation and tourism. I don't know how many of you have read this for commenting. The P&Z group went through page by page, article by article, to catch up and clean up as much as we could. We got stuck on a couple of items that you'll see highlighted in red that we would love some input on from town council. And one of the other things is we are hoping, much like I believe it was Carrie who submitted the public comment, And much like having public comment to come to us, we are hoping that after after the RV park owners listen to the outline, they will come to the public hearing to tell us if we missed something or need to fix something. And I appreciate that, public comment sheet that was handed in to us, because though we did not have time, yet we can incorporate things if you caught something we didn't. So that'll be important. For example, one of the things we did was we took out a lot of information that said what the RV park owner could do inside the park. Well, we took that out because it's not up to us for you to manage how you set up your park inside, as long as you don't interfere with your neighbors. So a lot of what we wrote, we hope, looks like how to safely manage an RV park for the surrounding area, and then how to control, I hate that word, but how to manage RV parking, et cetera, throughout the neighborhoods. So that's an overview of it. Amanda, I don't know how you want to handle the going through it stuff. Or Ann, well, we might take a second because Ann got away from us.
They're looking for food bank stuff here.
Okay.
So maybe we should give them a minute.
Okay, so I'll continue just to give a little more overview. If you start at the beginning and just look at the purpose, all we said it was to regulate use of RVs within town limits while protecting the integrity and character of the town for public safety, environmental impact, living facilities during construction, development and use of facilities for recreational vehicles in appropriate districts, economic and affordable housing opportunities, and the uses of RV as part of tourism-based economy of Bluff. So we're saying we want to have some rules, but we want to make sure we allow for all these things to happen within our town. Next, we go into the definitions, and these are important because when you're reading the ordinance, any ordinance, you need to refer back to the definitions for what we mean when we say it. So if you read through these and you catch something that doesn't make sense to you, let us know, because it won't come back to bite us later when we're using the ordinance. Okay.
Can I add something, Marcia?
Absolutely, please do.
We made sure to add tiny house and tiny house on wheels definitions in here because that's been a question coming up in town. We have had tiny houses put in place. So if you're reading the document, it says THOW, a thou. That's a tiny house on wheels. Just wanted to communicate that.
So, yeah, we're going to run up against a lot of this over these next few years as things change and people call them different things. We'll get them in there. But for the time being, Amanda's right. We just want to cover every possibility of things that people are putting on their land right now. Okay, so we've got a good purpose. We've got some good definitions. If you read something later and you look for the definition and we missed it, let us know because we want to make sure you can refer back to it. So if you start with the standards applicable to all zones, what we're saying is you can park an RV in the following things, in the following places, in the following ways, unless or until we say differently. So I don't know if we're going to go through this individually or what, so once again, we might just wait a minute for
I think we should at least go through the sections in red, but ask the town council.
Good, that's what I was kind of thinking too. So if you want to, everyone, you can flip through a little bit of our draft ordinance here and see if anything catches your eye, or at least maybe read the red stuff and we'll see if we can't talk about it.
And while I do have it on the screen here, the public can find a draft of this ordinance on the town council, or on the town's website. It'll be under the ordinances tab, and towards the end of the bottom, towards the bottom of the page, there's a little heading that says drafted ordinances, and that's what we're looking at today. So they can follow along.
Right, and don't panic if you see something that just goes crazy in there. Write it down and bring it to the public hearing so we know if you've seen something that doesn't work. Whether it's from an RV park standpoint or from RVs in your neighborhood, we want to know, we want the feedback of what people are saying and doing so we can finish this. I would like to, just reiterate that public input is really important, particularly on things like this, because it involves you and your house and your neighborhood. It involves the business part of town. So if you see something, say something. Oh.
Would it be appropriate, I have just kind of a clarifying question, and we can wait for folks to come back in, but I was curious about when you're referencing utility connections.
Okay.
I am certainly most concerned from like the health and safety standpoint
Right,
of what
okay.
we're looking at. Does utility connections encompass setback, all utility, or sorry, does it encompass septic?
Okay.
And setbacks, and like, is that what the intention was there?
I think it does, but I think we also talk about you must be hooked to septic and you must, in the parks.
I
and
see
stuff.
that in the parks, but my question is for long-term or even short-term, well, I guess long-term residential use, do we talk about permanent utilities, including septic and
I
electric?
believe we do, so that would be also as far as,
I think we've typically separated septic and utility though.
yes, two different ways,
So
so,
I just wanted to make sure, and again, I know you guys have worked really hard on this.
Well,
and
no,
we're
but that's-
going through, but that's a big one in terms of health and safety, and it's not only coming up, but it's fortuitous timing that we're looking at this because the county as well as some other municipalities in San Juan County are looking at this exact same thing right
Sure,
now.
sure.
So it's of
I
importance
was
that we're.
gonna message the same thing.
Yeah.
Kristen and I had a conversation about, permanently living in an RV.
okay, and then it needs to be
Septic.
hooked up.
With approvals and.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think we said, okay, did we say, hold on, there's legals,
So I just did a quick thing for like, if you are indeed separating it, when I see septic, I see it under recreational vehicle parks, and I see it under, recreational parks.
so we haven't set it for living in your RV on your land, is what you're saying, okay, so,
And that's why I was trying to confirm, because if it's under utility connection, if that's how you're doing that,
Right,
then it
okay.
would fall in, but if that's not the case, then I'd like to see it
Okay.
separate.
hang on, private drivers onto unoccupied mobile home parks.
Not to just
are
like kick
allowed.
things off, but to kick
No,
things off.
that could be an excellent catch of, we say you can live in it, but you better live in the right one. The
appreciate it.
only difference is if they're bringing their RV to live on their land and not leaving it there, they're moving it away.
Right.
Then it's,
That's
coming and going. But,
Yeah, if we're
So-
saying it is a residence that is being used as a
Okay.
residence, I think it's important, if you're saying you're gonna live there, it's utility, it's septic, it is health and safety that we are, helping to regulate to ensure quality of life and safety.
okay, so what we have to do is be sure to go back to the standards applicable to all zones and say if occupied if occupied for residency must be hooked up to septic then. So that would be a line we would actually add under that. Okay, good. I
Is
put
there,
it,
I don't think there's any mention in here of,
no, that's what she's saying.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
just gonna take notes.
I'm not gonna make any live changes.
Okay, okay,
For
good.
clarity's sake.
Okay.
Amanda.
So maybe you and I can meet afterwards and decide if you're putting, okay, perfect. Okay, so everybody's here, great, hi Linda. So far, all we did was do an overview of where we are, which is to say there's a purpose, there's lots of definitions, and then we start the actual meat and potatoes of this, saying what you can do where. So if we're on section 3, standards applicable to all zones, we are saying that you can do all of the following in the various zones, and then later we'll get into the specific zones that can have parks or other things in them. So one of the things that, so far the only thing brought up was Erin pointing out that we didn't say if you live in it, hook it up to the septic, which is probably a very good thing to add, because we're saying if you're living there, it's gotta be real. And then the next thing that comes up is the section marked in red, and that is non-conforming use. And I'll let you all look at it for a minute. The use after 2 years, 2 years prior to when this becomes law, if it existed in those 2 years, it is legally non-conforming, meaning it exists. However, it loses its legal confirmation status, its legally conforming status, when it changes ownership, when it's altered structurally, and the RV is less in compliance with the requirements than it was before the alteration, or the RV is relocated. So, here's our problem. In this discussion, we came up with ways of saying basically it's grandfathered in. That's the words we all use for commonality, for common discussion. There are some of us on the board, the P&Z board, that believe that that should not happen, because the reason we're writing this ordinance is to clean up some of the RVs that don't comply. There are RVs being used for storage, but they're not on the property, they're on the right-of-way of the property. There are vehicles that may be abutting people's residences that are basically off of any setbacks and such. So there are some of us who said, no, we're writing this to clean that up and to stop it. Others of us think that, well, if it's there, it's too late, you gotta leave it. So we're asking town council and, of course, public comment to give us feedback on that red zone, that red
So,
piece.
Marcia?
Yes.
I apologize for stepping out
No,
of this.
you had to, that's okay.
Yeah, it was the Rotary Club and food issues. So on Roman numeral 3:2, non-conforming uses,
Okay, that's where we are.
Did you consider saying if they're non-conforming and someone's living in it versus non-conforming and just used as storage, making that distinction as to what gets grandfathered in?
We did not, that's a
didn't
good,
consider that.
that's a good point.
No, because we talked about those being separate. So, okay, so that could be a distinction that we could look at, and then include in your comments right now, what do you think? That if they're lived in and non-conforming, we don't move or touch them because they're already lived in? And merely the storage ones are the ones that are asked, given a time frame to clean up? Just what are we thinking?
And that's a really good point, because what am I thinking? I'm thinking how
Well, it's hard. It took us forever to get this.
I'm thinking how it ties into the bigger picture of housing and the questions that we asked at the housing public hearing, where San Juan County is doing this allegedly comprehensive package of housing. And one of the things that I met with separately with that group was all of these empty modular mobile homes or RVs sitting on lots, nobody's living around it, in it, whatever. What can we do to make those lots available in the future for housing?
Okay.
And is there some way that we can get either federal or state assistance or county assistance to begin identifying those lots where somebody's parked an RV or a vehicle and left it, never to return? And is there a way we can clean up those areas and make it available for housing? And so my question really ties to this specifically, like, how do we look at, because I've been totally out of the loop on this, what is the purpose of an RV cleanup here? What are we trying to get at? Free up some space, clean up the trailer side that's blowing on the west side across the sand dune every time there's a wind? You know, what are we doing? And I don't have a position, I'm just trying to figure out like what your thinking is, and how do we factor in that other piece? Yeah.
Do you want to start to answer, or do you, go ahead.
So this, we weren't looking at this from a housing perspective, so I'm glad you brought up that component of like making available lots for housing, or living in RVs that are legally non-conforming. I think we were thinking more about public safety in terms of RVs that are parked and sort of abandoned in the right of way. I think that's something we need to address, and I think we were thinking about like nuisance considerations for neighbors if they're in the setbacks.
I think what happened is that we absolutely, if you notice even in our purpose at the very top of the ordinance, we definitely talked about the idea that in this day and age, RVs and or mobile home kinds of setups are in fact the way people do live. And that we absolutely want to be able to include that in our neighborhoods. Where we were protecting, as Amanda said, from the nuisance aspect of those that are not parked within the properties, et cetera. To your point, I like the distinction between lived in and storage. I think we should use that wording somewhere. And then also, my question to you would be, when you're talking about a lot that has an old mobile home on it, are you talking about that lot trying to get a way to make that mobile home habitable? Or are you talking about that, I mean, that lot someone must own it, and how do we overcome the person who just left it laying? I mean, I agree, we have examples of that.
Yeah, and that's really probably a bigger housing discussion, but what I wanted to do 6 years ago, and then we had COVID, and then I never got to it, and then the law changed about blights, because there was funding to clean up blights. Now they did away with that kind of funding for the most part, so you can't get funding to clean up blights. But my question was, like, could I put together a task force to identify these lots with abandoned, whatever, containers on them?
Right.
Identify by the VIN number, the container owner and the property owner, tie them together, make a contact, and get some money to get that thing off, which is a hazard, fire hazard, health hazard, safety hazard. Get that off and make that lot usable so that somebody could, in an ideal world, sell it, or build, or put something on it. That was my big picture thing.
Well, and I think that's a good thing then, for us to look at this and say, if we want to go to this section we're talking about and say, if you already have someone living in something that is non-conforming but non-threatening or non-impacting to its neighbors, then just leave it. Someone lives in a mobile home, but it's a little too close to the setback, or a little, fine, they're living there, you're not gonna have them pick it up and move it just because it's not 15 feet. Then talk about the storage aspect of those that do seem to be impacting the neighborhood by being storage in the middle of the right-of-way or setbacks or other. So those are two distinctions. I'm afraid that what you're talking about is sort of out of our scope, because it means reaching out to landowners and stuff.
Right, and why I'm raising it is I'm thinking that if I'm at all successful in getting a foot in the door with this housing, the San Juan County housing piece, that I don't want to have to come back and say, hey, planning and zoning, can you look at how you worded this? Let's, and that's why I'm just thinking,
Okay.
I just want you to be aware that that is something that I would really like to see happen, but it could never happen.
Right.
But just so you know, and Aaron had,
Yeah, I think my biggest concern with any time we start referencing non-conforming or anything where we're accepting the way it already is we are attempting to create a framework in which we can actually enforce the laws that we pass.
Right.
And if you are gonna have all of these outlying properties out, you're just kind of creating or just kicking the can down for the enforcement officer to say, well, I'm ignoring that one, but anyone new moving in or anyone else who wants to do it, you still have to follow our
Yeah, yeah.
laws. And so from an enforcement issue, I think that this does create an issue, especially when we're talking about from a health and safety aspect, if that is one of the purposes. So I like how you kind of phrased it too about, if there was any kind of thing in here, being able to distinguish the severity of the non-conformance, right? Like, is it a health and safety issue, or is it just like it's 2 feet closer to the setback than it needs to be? Like, that is a difference.
Lived in or not lived in, you're saying?
I think for all of it,
Okay,
because
okay.
either way, you are creating an environment in which an enforcement officer, you're setting up your enforcement officer to have issues, to get into arguments with people who are now non-conforming, maybe they weren't, maybe they moved something in, and they're gonna point at their neighbor and say, well, why don't I have to do this? Or, why do I have to do this if they don't? And they're like, well, they were there first. I just don't think we're setting up our communities to be good neighbors.
And I actually agree with that, which is why I'm one of the board members that came down on, the commission members that came down on the side of there's no grandfathered. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And we clean it all up. We give people time and we help them. We say, hey, you got 30 days to find the mover
Yeah.
and 30 more to move it, whatever. We
Yeah.
do what we need to do, but we clean it up.
Yeah, no, but if
And,
we're really trying to talk about, we want to enforce the laws that we pass, and that is such a big thing that
Yeah.
comes up in almost every meeting.
Yeah.
We need to set our enforcement officer up for success.
Okay.
And I think that's one way to do it. One thing to note though is when we're talking about like a permanent residence, because I'm with all of you that, these are, potential affordable housing opportunities, and I don't want to discredit that, is looking at registration. So if it's a registered vehicle and they're intending to move it and they have like a registration, when our enforcement officer is looking at things, that is a way that the county is able to track. If they're driving by, they're like, well, they're out of registration. Is it permanent? Is it not permanent? So I see the wheels spinning. So somehow, if you wanted to start figuring out, is it a building permit versus a vehicle registration permit, then you could lock down and say, yes, it is a permanently fixed residence.
And our LUC says if you're putting something on your land, like a mobile home trailer or RV, you must come for an LUC to be on your land, which, by the way,
Which we
says septic.
Which I think
Yeah,
Erin
right.
just wrote her job description for enforcement.
No,
I
well,
don't think so.
Look, this is exactly why it's in red, is because this is how the discussion went with all of us at the table. We agree, we don't agree, we're seeing the same picture but in 2 different ways, so this is exactly what's been happening.
And these grandfathered in things are just like our lighting grandfathered in things. They're not getting changed yet either. We have that same problem. So to focus on what's already here, I think, is not necessarily the goal. I think it's better to focus on what comes in new, myself.
So you would let it be then? You would let the existing be?
I would say if it's,
Wait, let her just talk.
No,
Yeah, no,
I think that it's a hard thing to focus on what's already here. It's like keep bluff, and then you come in and say, okay, we don't want you to do that, and we don't want you to do that, and yours is ugly, and yours, it has to be very defined parameters that you decide you
Okay.
want somebody to change their stuff that was here when you got here.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say that you could look at it as if it's on someone's private land or in right-of-way. To me, a right-of-way is not your property, and, it's.
That was a big part of it, and we all, if it's encroaching on someone's property or right-of-way, then that was what sort of started this, the impetus of this. The living versus storage, I think, is an important change that might help us do that. Amanda?
Another non-conforming thing, just to bring up while we're talking about it, we have in red on page 5, the under section 6 to this is non-conforming RV and mobile home parks. We are not sure, we couldn't decide whether or not, if there was a non-conforming RV or mobile home park, if that use should run with the land and be transferred to successors in a sale, Or if it must,
Must be updated.
or must be brought up to stand, yeah.
Without naming names, do we currently have that?
I don't think we have much of a problem. I think our existing RV parks, without having gone out and measured anything or no, you know, I believe they would all fit into our standards.
Okay.
Because the closest you would get to not living up to it might be an entryway on a road or something that wasn't written quite the same, but they're all safely ensconced in their land areas. So I doubt if we'd run up against anything that would shut it down. We just, as Amanda is pointing out, we didn't know if we wanted to say, hey, it's fine to live the way you are, but if you sell this place, the new owner has to come up with it. We don't quite know what you want to say about that.
You know, because this has kind of popped up in another arena on the short-term rentals, we spent a lot of time discussing how short-term rentals should either run with the property or run with the owner, and we ended up with, when you sell, it's the short-term rental, if you're not commercial, kind of disappears, if I remember this correctly. And I feel like we should be consistent. So if we're gonna say one for short-term rentals has a different rule on transfer for this,
Okay.
we really should have that discussion because, and I really apologize for not being more on top of having read this. It's
No,
been
that's
a
all right. Well,
crummy
we're all
summer,
behind.
so sorry. But, I mean, I just feel like, and maybe it's just me, but I feel like we should kind of be tracking the same process.
Which would mean you're saying to tell the new owners they do have to come up to standard.
Yeah.
So that in making their deal with the old owner, they would say, take a few bucks off because I have to come up to standards, or bring it up to standards and I'll pay the whole price, or whatever.
And we actually do that with the exterior lighting. When somebody's selling their place, they're supposed to come up to the standard.
Standard?
Yeah.
So see, that answers our question right there. To me, that says, come
It's
up to
like
standard.
Yeah.
practice in a lot of municipalities.
I put a note in there.
Good, okay.
think
There,
it's pretty
that's a good answer to that one. So, bringing us back to the one we were stuck on above, does that mean,
Yeah.
what does that mean? That means
What I mean-
no more grandfather, keep it all clean it all up as it goes? Is that what we think we're saying? I don't know.
I would assume that sounds congruent to me, right? The idea that you won't.
Or at least consider Jen's position that if something is done outside of your property
Yeah,
in the right of way,
on-
that certainly needs to
right.
be brought up to standard.
Right.
But on the sale of the property, then, it would then need to be brought to standard,
Okay,
which again is not.
so maybe using the discussion we just had, we could rewrite the sentence or two in this to bring it up correctly.
But I feel like if you're living in it, like it should be to standard now. Like you shouldn't have to wait to have, and also if we think about like contamination from gray water, black water, like
Oh, yeah.
that can't just be going wherever.
Right,
Like that
right,
needs
right.
to go into septic now. We can't wait until the property
But
sells.
that's, you're talking about a safety issue there. If you're just talking about something that is built without setback,
Yeah.
outside of the
Storage.
setbacks, which we have considerably increased the setbacks for property owners in the last 5 years, considerably.
From the
So-
county.
Of
Well,
previous
just commercial, you did, you said,
residential.
Residential too, I think, yeah, cause I think it's
It was-
seven feet, what is it in the county, you were on it?
try first, what is your name, and we'll go from there. I don't remember,
Okay.
but you're right, if things change. So are we need to fix the wording of this between storage and residential, that's number one. And then we need to say what? We need to say if you are within the boundaries of your property, non-conforming, you're okay. If you are beyond, I don't know quite how you, yeah. So, let's move on a little and see if anything comes up. Let's move on a little bit. and
No,
see
it's
if
not.
Oh, okay, Ed, go.
I am the primary advocate for 2A, B, whatever's up there.
Okay,
Mostly because I have a dog in the fight. My 2 RVs are the reason that there are complaints among the commission. My 2 RVs fall under both A1 and A2 because they overlap in the right-of-way and they are adjacent to a building. When those vehicles, those RVs went in there, I thought that I would be using them for more than just storage, but unfortunately, for a number of reasons, they turned into storage. So I have storage vehicles on wheels right next to a storage building that's not on wheels. So I have 3 little storage buildings there. They've been there a long time, as you can tell, because there are trees growing up right next to them. When those went in, the county did nothing. The county was totally unconcerned about where they were placed. This raises questions about whether or not it was in effect a county road at the time. Did it have a number? If it was a county road at the time, was the enforcement due process? If not, since there was no enforcement to protect the right-of-way, the town did not succeed to a protected interest in the right-of-way. And there's an estoppel argument here. And if that estoppel argument comes up for that purpose, it may start to show up a lot of other places in town. One thing I suggested back in the day we were working on this was, let's do an inventory. Let's find out where the RVs are that would be non-conforming. I looked around and I couldn't find any. It's just me. This is to protect the town from getting an estoppel argument from me.
Marcia?
Yeah, if I could answer that, I would say the first answer is we're not bound by the county in any way, shape, or form. They screwed up, let them screw up, we're done. We're not the county, we are the town. We are trying to enforce our rules, which is why we incorporated. That's number one. Number two, we're not taking inventory because while your particular vehicles are affected, we don't do ordinances based on people or their property. We do ordinance authorization and adoption based on the entire town. So for us to inventory and find out who's right or who's wrong has nothing to do with it. We want to be able to say we've seen some things that are wrong, at least to some of us, and therefore, how can we best clean them up? We've seen them in rights of way, we've seen them on vacant land where it's just, sitting and not being used. So I would argue that going backwards to the county has nothing. The county at the time was well known for not enforcing what was going on around it. The town is trying to pick up the pieces of that and clean it up. And this is how we're going to do it. That's where that came from.
I'll just say one other thing about the concept of the estoppel. I sat as a county planning commission member and was removed because I was virtually attending the meetings. And at first, when I got there, I was told, yeah, you can do that. And then after a while, somebody decided that, oh, we have a rule that says you have to be at the meetings in person. And so I got kicked off because the county attorney told the commission that if they didn't kick me off, they would lose the power to enforce the rule. And that's what has happened in the concept of estoppel. You've got to protect your rule. If you don't enforce it, you may lose it. And the county didn't enforce any right-of-way issues. The town cannot succeed to an interest greater than what the county had.
Absolutely not true. The county did not enforce its rules. The town is busy writing its rules. The county did not enforce, that's their problem.
We'll see what the judge says about that.
Absolutely, you can do so.
And that goes right back to what Erin says about we're trying to set up enforcement in a positive manner. You wanna fight, you got it.
I don't think this is the place to make
Yeah, I was
threats
gonna stop right there.
at all. And if it continues, we'll just stop the meeting.
Yeah, no,
So,
I agree.
it
I'm
moves-
sorry.
I do want
apologize.
to, want to make one response to Ed's argument about being the only one, that yours is not the only property. I can identify right off the top of my head at least one other. But Marcia's correct, this is not the place for us to pick on property owners, it's what's happening on the property and how we deal with it. And we need to move forward, so let's go on to
Yeah.
the next item.
Yeah. Let's move on and come back to, maybe something here will tell us about that.
I do have one quick
Go.
question. On page 3, under Roman numeral 3, then the regular 3,
Okay?
commercial storage of recreational vehicles, comma, maintenance operations, comma, reconstruction, comma, or construction activities.
Okay? So,
Are-
go ahead.
So, it might be that I'm just not reading it correctly.
Okay, we
So
might not
here's-
have worded it correctly.
Here's
so-
my concern. Does this mean, should we be moving forward on construction on the Cooperative Cultural Center, and we have construction activities and they put a trailer there?
Oh, no, that's in here.
That's,
That's in here. Work trailers and stuff?
Yeah.
That's in here.
okay,
That's separate.
perfect,
This
okay,
is saying
thank
if
you.
you want to, the construction of recreational vehicles.
On the vehicles, yeah.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
is talking about working on RVs and
Oh,
stuff.
okay, that's,
So what if you're an RV owner and you have an issue with your RV?
Well, that's on your property.
You-
Fix-
Okay,
If you're just fixing your own
Yeah.
RV,
yeah,
You can-
so you
Yeah,
can't get
commercial,
It says
commercial
commercial
storage
yeah.
maintenance.
I just wasn't reading it correctly,
no,
so.
I think it took us a
We
while.
can
So
clarify.
the commercial goes to all of those following the commas.
Right. Commercial doing of all this will happen in the industrial
Commercial
zone.
storage, maintenance operations, reconstruction, or construction activities of recreational vehicles
Of,
is
yeah.
only permitted.
Yeah.
So, yeah, can you
Okay,
just
we'll fix the words.
change that?
Could we,
Go ahead.
can we go back up to 3(1)A
Okay.
and maybe change that to your first night in Bluff is free? Okay, so, we have 3 RV parks. I mean, I always thought that part of the reason we were doing this ordinance is because tourists park in town. And
Correct.
and we wanted to stop that. We want them to go to our 3 RV parks. If we have a deputy come down and say, hey, you were here last night, you need to move now, you're gonna get an argument. Oh, no, I wasn't here last night. So that, to me, is really a problem.
And it is for all of us. Amanda, do you want to comment on what we said?
I think that one of our concerns with, one of the reasons why we said one night on a residential street or alley is we were thinking also about private property owners who might invite a friend to stay in that RV parks on the street for the night or something. So there's sort of 2 types of users that could be targeted by this, and we wanted to be thoughtful about that, but
Well, there are a couple of reasons, and Amanda's right. One of them is, wait a minute, I just parked in front of my friend's house for a minute last night to, a lot of that happens when we wake up to someone who's parked nearby on a street, because frankly, they got there late at night and they didn't, and I have no problem with that, everyone, But there's 2 things. One is we all agreed that we do not want RVs parked in our streets, to stay. So how do you write that? The second part of that argument is cities around the country have run into legal arguments of how do you tell people they're not allowed to park in parking zones, whether it be a big vehicle or not. So the wording has to be some way of legally saying we don't want you on our streets. We also mentioned the part about if someone parks there, what's going to happen? Is the mayor going to knock on the door and go, excuse me, your time's up, leave? In which case, you're exactly right, you're going to get a hard time. So I think we actually talked about getting some legal advice for that sentence to reflect what has been found from legislatures throughout the country trying to do it correct. I think Salt Lake City had big problems of RVs parked in neighborhoods, and it became kind of a homeless situation of they park their RVs across the neighborhood and just stay there. We can't have that, we don't want that. I never care if I wake up and there's an RV parked near my house because they got there late at night and didn't know where to park, great, fine. But if they don't move that day, I want to make sure they can. So we need to figure out how we address that, and it might be a Chris question.
Well, is that more of the, would this sentence
Okay?
be better moved over to our off-street parking?
Yes and no. If it had been, if it had been in there, maybe, but since we're addressing RVs, we put it here. If Chris thinks that that's what you're trying to say, then yes, if he wants to put a sentence in the parking part of our ordinance, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just, so, yeah, I think that is definitely a Chris question, is how do those kind of meld together? Because I can see an argument being made for those very expensive Mercedes Sprinters that are, it's not an RV, it's a van. Okay, and how about the folks parked in the library blocking
Yep,
the fire station? I
Yep,
can't get the
yep.
county to put a sign up there because technically that's their property, and I've asked and asked. No overnight parking.
Yep.
You know, so maybe that's really what we're looking at, like how do we define it as overnight parking? And
Yep.
where can that and does not that happen? And I
Yep.
can tell you right now, my neighborhood will go ballistic when they see this, because they will see everybody lined up to go up to the sand dunes parked in 8 West. And we will hear public comment from folks that haven't left their house in a year. I can guarantee it. And so I think this is a good one for us to kick over to Chris when we
Well,
do it.
And one of the things you guys discussed was whether you're parking or whether you're camping.
right,
Because if
right.
you put your awnings out and you have your chairs and you have your grills, that's what, we run into that all the time. People wanna just camp in our parking lot. I say, you're in the front yard of the motel, so,
Yeah.
It's
Or
different
on
if
our
you're just,
property and,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, if you're just parked there and you just pull in, you sleep inside, you get up in the morning, you might walk around your RV and then you drive away. It's really not a problem. They're parked there just like it was a car, they just happen to sleep in it. But when they're camping, they've got their dogs tied out and they've got
Yeah.
their barbecue going, and that's what kind of the
Absolutely.
goal was to get campers
Yep,
somewhere else.
Well, our sign out here says no overnight parking, no camping. So
Where?
it's this entrance. So it is really clear that, you go to someone and they argue with you again. Oh, no, I'm not camping, I'm just,
Yeah.
So that's to keep from arguing with people. I mean, the two things are kind of the same.
yeah, and
I don't think
there
that's
is
true.
no argument from P and Z that we didn't want to do something. We absolutely do want to do something. I believe we just got stuck on the correct way to do that legally. I remember a news article on Salt Lake City. How did they get rid of these legally parked vehicles? And, so yes, we do need to come up with the right wording, maybe followed by signage, but we'll have to see.
And it's also, that sign's for the community center, which
Yeah.
is different too.
Right,
Because
it
each
is different.
property can decide what's
Right.
happening on each property. This is more just generally stopped along the
Amanda?
street.
So I think probably for the sake of the agenda, we need to move on from RV ordinance. I have one procedural question, which is, we have a couple options before us. P and Z can make these edits and then bring another edited version to public hearing. I'm probably more inclined to bring the current version before public hearing so that we just make one big round of edits, but wanted to know if the town council had any thoughts on that.
That's an excellent point. And what kind of timing we're up against.
So, yeah, and we're only on what, page 2?
Yeah.
So I've been waiting for the
You have
next
some
pages
comments
for
on
my
that, yeah.
comments, yeah.
Oh, then
But,
page 3?
if you want to address tabling the whole thing till the next work session, or, because I definitely have some more
Well,
comments.
in terms of the public hearing, for me, I think roll out whatever it is to the public hearing and not have to make multiple edits. Makes sense to me. I don't know about everybody else, but
Well, it does to me too, because we're not getting very far along into making those corrections. We've got sort of 2 or 3 right now.
I know I have heard from the public, there is frustration, not necessarily just, Bluff, but there's frustration when a draft goes out to the public to comment on, when the board or commissioner, whoever already has intentions to make significant edits and a lot of edits, that the public doesn't feel as though they have time to actually comment on what is intended to be the final draft.
So you want us to make more corrections before we put it out there?
I don't want anything.
I think that makes
Just
sense,
for discussion.
because you can get all up, you can get all.
Right.
Worked up.
Worked up
Yeah.
about something that's already
That we
being
already
changed.
corrected, yeah.
I don't think it's fair to the public to put out something that has the intention of being changed.
Right.
If we've already talked about changing it.
One way or the other. Like
So you
wanted
wanna
to
see
say-
us
I think
do
we
a few
should, I think
changes.
we should, if we have things that we're planning on changing, we should change them before we show them to the public. That's my.
so how do you want to handle today? Shall we just keep slogging through it?
Or,
I defer to you as to whether or not you wanna make sure you address other things on the agenda.
Well, looking at the agenda, I can tell you that 3 is, I'm just gonna take it off because the legislature's already working on changes and deadlines, and so 3, discussion of need for airport influence area and zoning. Stay tuned, we probably aren't going to need it by the end of the year, and it's certainly not in the form that it is right now. 5, we could probably hold if we don't want to, depending on what we want to do, we can probably even hold 4 and 5 and just spend a little more time on the RV and then go to the subdivision.
Yeah.
But I think 4 and 5 kind of fit into how are we going to do 2025 and how are we going to get these other public hearings done first, which kind of falls back to, we need to get through these other these 2 ordinances.
And the subdivision, did you get Hanson's to come down to the next meeting? Because it's just in another.
I haven't emailed them yet, but I think our subdivision ordinance discussion will be relatively short today.
So shall we just spend a little more time on this? Okay, go ahead then, planning and zoning.
Okay, let's, right now we are in section, we are on the,
We just finished 3.
agriculture and residential zones.
I'm sorry, there we go. We did standards applicable to all zones. We talked about a couple of the things that are hanging us up. Now we came down to, what we're coming down to are the allowable things in specific zones. So in agricultural and residential, the agricultural A2 and A3, we did say that you can in fact have RVs used as rental units, and if it's a short-term rental, by the way, it would have to conform to STRs, which means they probably wouldn't have any more in the residential zones. They would just be allowed in agricultural perhaps. So this section got into kind of how many things you are allowed to sort of park on your yard, park on your property, and how many you can allow people to be in them. Can you rent them? Are they empty? Those kinds of things. And that's what we wanted to watch out for. So if you want to take 1 second to sort of read through, they can be used for STRs in A2 and A3 zones. They could be used for STRs in residential. However, we all know that STR in residential is closed. A2 in residential would be for RV parks of 4 or less, and means 4 or less vehicles is not, RV parks of 4 or less RVs or THOWs are allowed with the minimum lot size of 1 acre, but you're subject to RV standards as set forth later. Private driveways can host occupied RVs and THOWs with property owner's permission on a temporary use basis, so your friends can stay in their RV on your property. Unoccupied RVs may be parked on private parcel, but not to exceed 2 per acre. And mobile home parks are allowed in these zones, which are in approved licensed mobile home parks, minimum lot size of an acre, which would be 4 of them. So I guess what we said was that there's some open land out there that someone might own in an agricultural zone and want to put some sort of small RV use, like all their good friends have RVs, so why not have a place for them to hook up? Things like that. So that's what that little use was set up to be. Does anyone have any comments? And you may have to go home and read this and comment during, or listen during the public hearing and put some comments in too, if you notice something later.
Why limiting it to 4 per acre, if I can ask?
I think we said that for that residential and agricultural areas, so that it would not be a packed piece of land within those zones. Because in commercial and stuff, actual commercial RV parks, we didn't say that, right? Didn't we say?
We didn't.
But
Yeah.
if we're looking at this as looking at this as an affordable housing issue, 4 per acre is not really a good use of space. You can house a lot more than 4 RVs per acre, or tiny homes, or something like that.
Well,
And I would add that we were trying to get clarification on numbers from the county, like best practices on density, and they weren't able to provide us with that. They said generally, for an RV park, you want about half the acreage to be used for septic and the other half for RVs. Is what the county told us, but I think we'd be looking for input on this figure that we put in here.
Aaron, do you know offhand how many spots are behind the restaurant?
No, the only thing that I was gonna say is that
there's 6.
it's difficult when we're talking per acre, cause a lot of our residential parcels are much smaller than that.
of course.
So,
Oh, you're talking about behind the restaurant, where's the,
I think
But-
they're,
I think
but
there's
that's
6,
commercial,
but-
aren't you zoned
Well,
commercial?
I
We
know,
are,
but I'm just saying,
but-
if you're looking at something from
how
a,
many you could fit
and
on
you're
that.
looking at something from an affordable housing standpoint, I mean, you're not necessarily looking at a commercial district to do that.
So you might be able to say 6 or 8 or whatever you want, or, and we did this a lot. I mean, this group of P and Z people went through these words a million times and kind of came up with this and said, let's get some input. So if you have a good number you want to say, or if you want to say not a specific number based on approved septic, you could
Yeah,
say it
that's
that
Septic
way.
and
I think
setbacks
that,
and,
that's
To
why
me,
it's
that's-
highlighted.
yeah.
The highlighting was about trying to figure out what the capacity actually is in an acre. Yeah, that was a question, for sure. So it seems like we don't know the answer.
I mean, if it's in line with the zoning ordinance, I think the general consensus has been, not always, is that we're not necessarily regulating density, but we are regulating to setbacks and utility and septic.
Septic, right.
And
And
so
I
that would
think
kind of
that's an
guide us.
agreeable way to be able to say that, and perhaps that's the change of wording we need, that says allowable per acre to septic and utility standards.
There you go.
That,
And one of my questions is the 1 acre. So I could phrase this as a question, but here's
Okay.
my thoughts on it, is that we're all kind of about small business
Right.
and ways to survive here and whatnot. So if you have a half an acre or something and you can put a few RVs on it and not make an RV park per se of 18 or 20.
well, an RV park is 2 or more.
2 or more. So you have something that's less than an acre and you have 2 RVs on it, so it's a park in
Right.
Bluff. Other places require 18 to become an RV park. Before it's an RV park, you have to have 18 spaces and things. So, but if ours requires 2, you cannot have an RV park really anywhere.
Well, and this is just for residential in A2.
Okay, but
Do we need to?
I was just gonna say, if we have a natural transition, you'll wanna restart your recorder, so it's easier to upload.
I'm apparently failing at my job.
Sorry. Did you already have the timer? I'm sorry.
Let's take a couple minute break so we can reboot this.
Okay.
Thanks.
I
You can
need
see
to
how,
check on Nancy, I'll be back.
okay, thank you, Ed.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt. That was my little.
No, that,
Yeah.
You can see
Coming
how,
back to Lou. We're coming back to Lou.
you can see how hard this was to do based on exactly this.
Yeah.
Going back and forth on the basics of how many per number and how many numbers per number. And it was like,
And I got a .96 acre lot, so I'm screwed.
you just can't do anything, just move.
Is that a Bluff acre? Oh, is that, oh, I didn't realize that was a thing. All right, good. I take it back. I'm just writing 1 from now on off my paper.
You'll have people in the county ask you all that all the time, is
Yeah.
it a bluff acre or an acre?
Oh, really? Oh, that's fine. I've never, okay. So I guess I should just call it a bluff acre. A bluff acre is
That's
something
like they
roughly
told me.
around an acre.
This, .9 something carat or, it's
No, like,
oh, I have a 1
very
carat.
It's a
Yeah, yeah.
Jay-ism.
Oh, because he divided everything up
Yeah.
roughly
when-
in an acre.
Yeah, he didn't,
Did he use a tape measure or just his eyes?
Well, you probably used a tape measure, but,
But
which
you know,
one?
yeah, exactly, right, exactly. Which shed did he pull that tape measure out of? That's a good point. Plus they're in the, they're like rezoning. Did they do that to your lawn with the right of way?
handing out
And
mails.
come out and spray paint the
I should
road?
have said this.
I know, yeah, it's just, it's an amazing thing what a wagon dictates.
Well, with me,
It's like-
I did not because I did that one, I mean, it wasn't a surprise to me because
No, it wasn't, I knew it was there, I just thought it was funny to see.
yeah.
I mean, I know that
exactly.
there's like the,
Well, yeah.
it's just when you have it in your head that you're like, oh yeah, these are big roads for turning wagons around, and then you see what it actually
And
is,
then
and you're
you're
like,
like,
oh
oh,
wow,
yeah.
that's impressive.
No, the one who's really having heartburn about that is in Lincoln.
Oh, is it like go up into the house?
Wait, who came up with that?
Was the county was doing, they're spray painting the,
No, it's the road department.
that's you that was going on? Okay.
No.
No.
No, wait, the
Bluff
town's
Road
road
Department.
department.
This sounds like maybe an agenda item.
Oh,
It was, well, it was.
We have to stop, we have quorum.
Yeah, stop talking.
I'm gonna say it
I'm
before
asking
Ann
as a
does.
private citizen, yeah.
Uh-oh, okay.
As a private citizen, I love the spray paint.
Uh-oh.
I don't think it's affected anybody
Oh,
except for
okay.
Second East yet.
Yeah, exactly. No one else, right?
Okay, you guys are wonky.
I don't know,
It's
yeah, I'm almost like, I don't even know what that road is. Is that
As
even a
someone
road?
who used to live on that road.
Can I ask a quick question? Do we have industrial zoning in Bluff?
One, 2 nights? I think it was just one.
Oh, but you don't even, I mean, even when you had to do that, you don't even know how much better it was.
Oh, I
than when
can't-
I lived
oh,
there.
I'm
and
sure.
You had to drive over the Grand Canyon.
I think it reminds me a lot of mud season in Vermont where I grew up, so it's nice. It's bumpy, it's just what it is.
That's what Francisca named it, was, I live on Bumpy Road, Bluff, Utah.
Bumpy road,
That's what she said.
I'm gonna start writing that. FedEx might be able to find my house finally if I describe it as, just go over the laundromat, follow the bumpy road.
Stay posted. We'll have to talk about addressing.
Oh, I know, FedEx called me yesterday for a package and they were like, can you describe where you are? Cause the lady doesn't know how to get to your house. And I was like,
Usually just.
how
leave it
can
at
you
my
copy,
house,
just
but-
leave it at the,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I've gotten stuff delivered to the apartment, cause Brian
Uh-huh.
is also there, so if it has my name on it, sometimes it'll go with it.
Sure. I found snacks. Anybody want?
Good.
Okay,
I'm afraid if anybody saw what UNHS had here, we'd look pretty pale.
What did they
I
have?
can't believe that they didn't even leave.
Wait, was that for the assist
I
training?
know,
smorgasbord.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, they went all out.
They're
And
always
as they
like,
should.
they're always like worried about their budget, and I'm like, well, that's because every time we have a meeting, you guys serve us a 9-course meal.
3 tables full of.
And I think that was just the snacks, right? Because I saw them cater in other stuff.
That was
It just the
probably,
snacks.
they're really good at getting
Yeah.
grants for lunch.
Good, good, well deserved.
Grants for lunch.
Okay,
All right.
I'm turning the next section on. So this is a continuation of the meeting, the joint meeting of Planning and Zoning and Bluff Town Council. It's 2:10 PM. We recessed at 2:05. Everybody is still here that was here previously, except for Ed Dobson, who stepped out for a few moments. So, where are we?
We are talking about standards applicable to agricultural and residential zones. So I would remind you that absolutely we can change some numbers and sizes, no problem, but we're only dealing in this section with those zones. So be careful not to say, oh, 18 or 20, whatever, because then you're talking more commercial stuff, at least in our opinion when we were discussing it. So Jennifer, if you have a couple of numbers or something, if you want, or Luanne to say half an acre is 4, an acre is 10, or whatever can fit safely with septic and utilities, things like that, that's fine. You can suggest those changes, and we can see if we can word them in. Does that sound?
I think my problem with looking at this
Okay.
is, and the main one I found that I kind of can tie into is
Okay.
Logan City.
Is where?
Logan City, and the one that I sent to my email didn't come out
Okay.
clearly, but basically the idea was, don't put them big RV parks, because that's what we're
Yeah.
talking about, RV parks. Don't put them in your commercial high-end use, because they don't generate as much as what
Okay,
another commercial
okay,
thing, for sales
okay.
tax, for use, for everything else. And the RV parks the people who visit them want to be adjacent to some green space. They
Sure.
want to be adjacent to, somewhere where they're going, because they're
Right.
vacationing. They
Right.
want that little buffer. So they don't necessarily want to be in your industrial. They said, don't put them in
Yeah,
industrial
no,
at
no,
all.
yeah.
But in commercial, you're taking that, you don't get much sales tax back. You get some TRT from them staying.
Okay.
Those people probably go out to the restaurant some, but not, so they said to think about that when you're
Sure.
allowing them in your high-end commercial.
I like that.
So the other thing that they said is RV parks are not conducive to residential areas.
Yep,
So when you have your neighbor that has a 15-foot setback, but they have somebody new in all the time, it kind of goes back to the STR ordinance. That if
it's
you,
annoying.
yeah, it needs to comply with the STR if you have something else there. And and that's where the acre is kind of applies, because if you have to have an acre to have those, and your STRs then are not RVs. Anyway, that to me is a little bit complicated to make sure they
Okay,
match up.
okay.
So, but then you think about agricultural, and these are lumped together. You've got residential and agricultural in the same pile. This place says that they want them in the recreational zones, which we don't really have. We have, our ag zones are kind of our recreational zones.
Right,
So if you have them there, and you can only have a couple of them in your RV park, but yet you're out on the edge where they're kind of enjoying the space, and you're away from neighbors, because you're away
Sure.
from the residential. So it seems to me like maybe the ag, A2 and A3 needs to be separated into its own, and the residential needs to take
Oh,
out
that's-
having RV parks in the residential area.
that's not terrible. So that you could say residential, keep it to the little numbers we were talking about.
Yeah, like
if at
your
all.
STR.
Yeah,
I don't think an
yeah.
RV park belongs in a residential
Right,
zone
okay.
area.
And then the A2 and A3, make sure that that's the ones where you can allow up to septic and utilities management.
See, I would fundamentally disagree that I think we should have more of the density in residential zones, and A2 agricultural zones have less density. If you think about how we planned the town with like commercial along the corridor, and then residential, and then surrounded by A2 and A3 lands for the aesthetics of the town.
Okay,
That was my leaning in when we were writing
But,
this. so.
but our whole entire town is surrounded by federal and
yeah.
government stuff, so we need to do within our town and where everybody is and where they'll come and stay and where they'll be comfortable.
Clarification, is this for short-term or short-term
RV.
use or for residents?
This is for RV parks.
For RV
RV
parks, so
parks.
people in and out all the time. Okay, thanks for the clarification.
And then another thing on RV parks, they really are focusing, and it looks like they've talked about it a lot, and they really say that RV parks are not conducive to long-term rentals, which is what you were talking about, affordable housing, does not go with an RV park.
No, we talked about that because what we said, one of the rules that came in this original template of a ordinance was the owner of the RV park can only allow long-term rental for a certain amount of time, not to exceed 90 days, or whatever. And we said, that's not what we're trying to do here. First of all, we're not trying to micromanage whoever's running their own business as an RV park. And second of all, we're not looking for people to live in RV parks, although we did discuss mobile home parks, which we'll get to in a minute. So what you have is you have someone who has an RV park and then says, there are 6 solar workers coming to put in panels, they're going to stay for 90 days, they have their RVs. That's great, that's, we want to provide a place for that. But we're not gonna micromanage inside the RV park to say that you either A, have to or cannot do that.
Yeah, I remember that discussion, and that makes sense too, is just
Right,
sort of
right, so.
saying if it works for your business, they can live there, or if they.
Right, and so residential districts, then, if you want to say that you could have people living in, if you have a piece of land and you want to live on that land in an RV, that's up to you, that's your decision. Much like Erin was pointing out, we do want you to be properly hooked up to utilities or cleaning in such a way that you're not destroying the land and and affecting your neighbors, but you can live there, it's your land. So you're managing different pieces of land for different uses is what it comes down to. And
Okay, so then, my other question before.
well, you're doing great because you're bringing up all the things that made us get this far.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So at the top, it says the ordinance overrides zoning code 6.01.110, stating that RV parks can only be allowed in C3. But then when you go to this next section,
Right.
section 5, RV recreational vehicles may be stored, displayed, sold, and serviced in C3.
Okay.
And then where can you put an RV park?
Only in
In all commercial zones only? Is that where they can be? So like C1, C2, C3, all of it along the highway and up, down towards,
I think
Is
we,
it just 5, number 4, recreational vehicle parks are allowed in C3? They're only allowed in C3?
That's where they're currently allowed to.
That's where they're
but
currently.
but it doesn't, I don't think it says that in number 4, does it, or am I just not seeing it?
4 is agricultural and residential. Now
Okay.
we move down to 5, which is standards for commercial zones.
So it's
And
all
we're saying,
3, C1, C2, C3? Well, no, here it says, I highlighted it, I'm sorry. It's number 4. Recreational vehicle parks are allowed in C3.
Mhm.
And so my question is, why not C1
1
and
and
C2?
2.
If we're not putting them in residential and we can put them in agriculture, but why not C1 and C2, which are the lighter commercial zones?
I think that goes back to the point you made earlier about don't put RV parks in the high use
Yeah,
commercial
but that
areas.
C3 is our highest one, and another town suggests don't use up your commercial. But in Bluff, we've had that discussion too, is why do we let residences build in C3? And that's because of housing issues. But we allow residential in C3, but not a RV park in C1 and C2.
Cause C1 and C2, I think our thinking was that those are like smaller retail business type corridors where the RV parks may not be as compatible as with a C3, where you
But
can
in
have
our
other types
case,
of lodging.
that's what, there it is, there's the
Where's
map.
the C1?
So
C1
C1
is
is the light
light purple?
purple.
Okay.
Yeah, let me back out for just 2 seconds so I can get our, oh gosh, too far. Okay, close your eyes if you're dizzy. Okay, yeah, so C1 is light purple, C2 is
Can you
blue, and C3 is dark purple. So as we zoom in,
Yeah, so remember when we had this discussion in zoning times, the purple was C3, and all those were places that had a lot of commercial. The blue was sort of a buffer zone to protect the historic district and not have total full-on C3 there. But then those areas seem to me like they would be ideal for RV parks or.
Which one?
The blue, the C2s. And then the purple goes straight north up the wash because of the school being there. I always thought it should stay closer to the highway and that others shouldn't encroach on the residential, and there's residential right across the wash, which if that was a city market or a, whatever, could be a lot of impact in that whole neighborhood on both sides of the wash. And the same south, there's an RV park to the south there, but if it ever left, that could be whatever big commercial operation that is there, which would also impact that whole neighborhood. So that's already in there. I'm not suggesting at this meeting that we change that, but I'm wondering why we wouldn't do C2 as another option for RV park people. And I don't know do we have any C1s?
this is C1, and then this is C1.
That's
Twin
the-
Rocks is C2.
Oh yeah, no, they're C3.
There's C3.
Yeah, they're here.
So that is,
Right.
that's across, that's the old Wild Rivers.
Yeah,
Correct.
that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so like, the coffee shop, that's C2. If you come on down from Twin Rocks all the way around that corner, which borders the old school and borders the fort, there's, anyway, I was just wondering what your thoughts were on how we take that out of the options for people that may want to use that land. How it would negatively impact anybody any differently than being on C3.
So, I kind of got lost on the C1, 2s, and 3s. So what is do you have a recommendation that you're asking?
Yeah, I think that I think they shouldn't be allowed in the residential areas unless they conform with the STR. Otherwise, you just have a different way to call it an STR. So we need to make those line up. But then in the agricultural ones, that needs separated out, and I think that was discussed. But then when we go to commercial RV parks, C1, C2, C3, all commercial ones, if somebody can make a business out of it, why are we stopping them?
Okay.
Cool. And I've noted your comment in here.
So if we change this up, the idea would be that, and Erin brought up for us the definitions of C1, C2, and C3, so that, so if we change that up and say nothing in resident, I like that part about residential because of the STR aspect of it, and we certainly see it where it abuts us over by the fort, because they have the Jen's house and the, and what's her name's place that are both RV parks by, definition, even though they're not. So, I like the fact that we snuck in the idea of that STR definition being,
Well, and it is hard, the ones that are pre-existing.
Yeah, well,
Because-
And that wouldn't necessarily apply to those anyways, because they're there for longer than 30 days, which is the definition that was given for a short-term rental.
that they
That's
pull
right.
in for the whole season, they do. You're right, they pull in for the whole season.
Definition of a short-term
So
rental is
then-
that there is somebody living there less than 30 days.
Right.
So then that's not an RV park, so we're talking the difference between RV parks that are
Right, it's actually
short-term,
private property with somebody's RV on it for a while, so.
but which are houses.
They're,
Yeah.
yeah, they're
It's just affordable housing
'Cause
on
the-
those.
It's also employee housing, which we have a real problem with. We have a few places in town, that's one of them, that need employee housing.
and they
But
bring-
it's
they
not
bring
called
their
an
own.
RV park.
Right.
So you could have, depending on how you can hook into the septic, you could have whatever you want
Right.
on your residential lot. I mean, do we have anything that regulates how many?
Well, that's
put on
what
a
this, that's what this was trying to do.
But this is
Yeah.
RV park, this,
But that's where that's where when they were developing density, that's where they, I believe, decided to let it be dependent on
on septic.
septic as your density control.
That was your, that was
That
what you
was
pointed
my
out to do,
suggestion,
yeah.
but I can't remember how it was changed.
And RVs
No, I think that
don't
is,
use-
yeah, basically that you can have as many as your system can safely manage.
So then like what's existing there around the fort and stuff is, there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, like if somebody else wanted to do that on the next place,
They don't rent to strangers. They do not rent overnight. They do not rent on a turnover basis to
No, it's not a
strangers.
short-term
It is,
rental.
it is employee housing, it is, long-term or not short-term, so it is seasonal. So therefore, it doesn't necessarily become part of RV park information. However, it's a perfect example of that might work, but overnight coming and going on those same lots would be intrusive to the neighborhood. So saying that they can't have it in the residential zone might be okay. So maybe that is a good, good excuse not to
Something
have it in residential. I don't know. I'm just saying that's where the discussion comes in. See, this, we should have had this meeting a long time ago so we could get further along. Because we got stuck a few times knowing that you guys would have the input as well, which is totally a necessary part. And my suggestion is we catch each other sooner on some of these big ones. So, okay. So, commercial zones, does everyone, is the consensus, nobody's voting here today, is the consensus that we look at commercial C1, 2, 3? And is the consensus that we take residential out? Is that a general consensus in the conversation?
Out of RV park,
Okay.
good. That's-
take all residential out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
take,
get rid of every-
get rid of the residences.
houses.
Okay, so that gives us some direction that we can work on. Great. See, we're rolling now.
Of course, you
Um,
can't take short-term rentals out of the residential,
Right,
so.
Yeah, but that's what we're saying, right?
Yeah.
Essentially
not
that's
park.
the-
Yeah.
Well, and you
Right.
couldn't create a new one in a residential anyway.
Right.
but somebody who has one could
Could
add.
If someone has an I know someone in town who keeps saying, well, I have two, or whatever, which is fine, totally legal to
But
have
then-
one, and is thinking eventually putting the RV as the second one. More power to you if that's what you want to do, but are we going to allow it? So if you have an STR license and you want to use it as an ADU and an RV, or however you want to use your two little STR licenses, if it fits correctly and safely for septic, then yeah.
Well, the ordinance has to follow the ordinance,
Yeah.
which includes a picture of the septic, so
So,
that,
And I don't think it limited, I'm trying to remember that one, and I don't have it right here, but I don't know that it limited how many you can have.
yeah, STR,
Did it, see, do you remember it?
Yes, because
Yeah,
I
tell
have
me.
two and I'm only using one right now.
right.
But so you can have two STRs on
Oh, no, did it limit how many STRs you could have
on
per parcel?
your
I
parcel.
don't remember, no, I don't think it limited that.
See, so we just wanna make sure those line up, that, if you have an STR, you can have however many.
Okay, so it looks like we've been given some direction on the ones we're talking about, and Amanda's been over here typing away or taking notes, which is great. And so let's keep going and see if anybody else has circled some other things. So we're talking about A2 and A3, take out residential, commercial, look at C2, 1, 2, and 3. And now, standards for recreational vehicle parks and mobile home parks. So let me say something first. One of the things that happens when you have an RV park is you just have overnight RVs coming and going, perhaps a couple of RVs that are used by the park owners to rent to people, or any configuration of those RVs that works well for the RV park owner. And we tried to not impinge on that. We tried to say, you run your park properly in terms of utilities and septic, and you stay within your boundaries and don't bother your neighbors, then you're good. We're not gonna tell you what to do inside. So then, another version of this comes up that says, well, how about those nice mobile home parks that people build where they allow the mobile homes situated in 2 rows, and then the front of it is some overnight parking of RVs. And if we are in the throes of an affordable housing crisis in this country, those are some of the answers that are being given to settle them. So this group, P and Z, said, we need to add mobile homes to our definitions and ordinance because someone could come along. I think a perfect example is east out by the Mission. You've got a couple of RV or mobile homes sitting there on someone's land. Might be a nice way to develop a couple more, mobile home rows, and someone could. So let's give someone the opportunity to use some of their land to put together something like this. So that's why you see the words recreational vehicle and also the word mobile home park, because that is just including all the different things that we came across when we wrote this. Okay, so does anyone have any comments on the idea that you can have a park with sort of mixed media, mixed stuff? Does anyone see
Although I
anything?
do remember, I think I mentioned it in one of the meetings, that the legislature has a law in there that says you can't have mobile homes disallowed from residential areas.
That's right, we know
Mobile
that.
home parks.
Yep,
And
yep.
so combining them here with the RV park, because in the RV parks we say they can't, is it clear enough that if you have just a mobile home park, then you can use residential land to set it up?
Wait, say that again now, okay.
If you're gonna build a mobile home park, how
Okay.
many you have to have less than 1 or less than 2, which is 1 RV coming and going to be able to be in a residential area. You can't, so you're not.
No, a mobile home is allowed as a residential use in residential zoning.
Mhm.
So if you own a lot and you can afford, and
But this is a
what you
park.
best, okay, so,
This is a whole park.
okay, so now if you're in the park, you're asking what? I'm not,
I'm asking if we need to separate that out from the RV parks, because you can only have 1 RV person coming and going,
Yeah, if,
before it's not allowed in
okay,
residential.
go Brian. 'cause
just
you-
that if it's a residential, if it's in a residential zone, because we're saying before, because we were before removing parks, RV parks from residential spaces, but there's a state law that says that mobile home parks are allowed in residential areas, we have to make that distinction in this section. So one thought is that.
Whoa, there's a state law
Isn't
that's.
that what we just, isn't
Yeah,
that what we
that's
just said?
what
There's a
the
state law that says
yeah.
you can't limit mobile home parks from residential areas.
Because of this affordable housing
Yeah.
and whatnot.
So we just have to make the distinction.
So you can't say that
of
you
mobile
can't
Oh,
have a
home
mobile
park.
home
don't take it
park.
off completely,
Yeah.
separate it.
Yeah, just
Separate.
separate it,
Gotcha. I'm
separate
sorry.
it so
I'm
that,
sorry.
or maybe it doesn't even
Can we
apply.
plug it into the mobile home
Does it-
park use section and just say that this mobile home parks are allowed in?
Within RV
Within.
parks.
within.
No, that's not
Well,
what,
but they're allowed, but mobile home parks specifically are allowed in residential, but RV parks aren't. is our
Right, but
discussion.
aren't mobile homes allowed in, the way you've got it set up, mobile homes are allowed in a RV park?
Mhm.
no.
I might have missed this. Why were mobile homes starting to be addressed in this?
Because mobile homes are often used, there's two ways they're used. One is to set an actual mobile home park and then have overnight RV spaces at the front. Or the second one could be in an RV park, sometimes they'll park some mobile homes at the back as the office of the place or the renter. And go ahead, Amanda, if you have.
We also explicitly added mobile homes and mobile home parks to this ordinance because they're not, I believe they're not in our other zoning ordinance. And so because we didn't want to be open for a lawsuit by looking like we're excluding mobile home parks, we wanted to include them in here.
Okay, sorry to derail. I just want to make sure that you update that in the purpose. So, because if I'm reading this, I'm thinking, okay, recreational vehicles.
Yeah.
I see that you've got that in the title, but if something to that effect is, like, that's the purpose of why it's included in the ordinance, I think is important.
And they're allowed, they,
Nope, that's perfect.
are they not allowed? I mean, mobile homes are totally allowed in an RV park. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
we
yeah.
don't want to prohibit mobile homes at all. They just were absent from our zoning code, so we wanted to make sure that they are now reflected in our body of ordinances as something that's allowed.
They can be on your private land where you live. They can be inside of a recreational vehicle park, because sometimes RV park owners will actually have a couple of mobile homes used as either rental or the manager lives there. And then the other thing that there is quite a bit of now is mobile home, actual little developments, mobile home, little, a couple of streets of them, and then the front street is often an RV. There could even be, if it's a multiple use presentation, there could be a convenience store, a C-store kind of corner thing. I don't know, I'm not saying that's what's happening, I'm saying we want to be open to that as a community, looking for ways to house people and bring people in for recreation and tourism. So mobile home parks are the way that some of that's happening, and as Amanda said, we didn't have anything about it.
We just have to not restrict them in residential areas though, right? Isn't that the?
Absolutely, they never were though.
No, I know, but it's just about the because the
Oh, the
language
language.
is, because we're lumping RV and mobile home parks together in this section. The idea is just to make sure that the language doesn't prohibit mobile home park use in a residential area, even though we're gonna prohibit RV park.
Right, so if you have a mobile home park in a residential area, you can't have the front half be
Gotcha.
RV.
Right.
That,
You
I'm
can't have-
sorry, that's where I lost.
That's the only distinction we're trying to
Okay,
make.
okay.
Is that mobile
maybe
home,
it-
like a residential mobile home park can exist in a residential area, you just can't have an
The,
RV
the
park
overnight part of
also
it,
there. Yeah.
So if everyone could just, like, one person at a time talking, because we now have 4 of you talking at once. So.
Sorry, we had to clarify between ourselves. Go ahead, Brian, you say.
No, that's just, yeah, they were just trying to make sure that within this section, which is standards for recreational vehicle parks and mobile home parks, we are not, none of the language is limiting mobile home parks from existing within residential zoning, because they are allowed there, they just cannot have an RV park aspect to them.
And so that's kind of in number 2A, it says may provide spaces with defined access for recreational vehicles.
There you go,
So
except
that's-
in residential, yep, good.
Yeah, so except in residential zoning.
Nice, good catch. I think. Okay. Okay, it appears that so much of what we thought out, everyone's agreeing with the basic outline of this, and the discussions are becoming numbers and size and place, which is exactly what we needed from you guys to come in and hit us with one, that we missed or didn't consider the same. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. If anyone sees anything else, you want to keep going?
Something to consider too is in number 6, down 1 and then E, it's on page 4. Says recreational vehicle park must provide for public open space. Some of them that I saw were like 20% needs to be, or,
And we decided not to put that number in there. We talked
okay,
about
but
that.
how do you say that why put it in there at all then? Because you say, well, I have open space, you can sit right here in your car and be outside of your car, so maybe just eliminate that E.
Well,
Luanne, can you reference exactly where you're at?
Yeah, so it's number 6, V1, standards for
page?
recreational,
What
on page 4. And then it's,
oh, it actually lops onto page 5 if you're reading it down,
yeah,
but she's.
1E says recreational vehicle park must provide for public open space. The land covered by vehicular roadways, sidewalks, and off-street parking shall not be constructed as part of the common area required for parks or playgrounds for occupants. But we don't really say.
And it should be construed as part,
Yeah,
constructed as part,
yeah, shall not be construed as part.
or
and so-
counted, should not be counted as
Counted,
part
yeah.
of the.
But we don't say how much you have to have
Right,
in
'cause-
there, so we either need to take that off and they do as they please within their own park.
Or we tell them to do at least, and we've seen mostly, did we see 10% and 20%? 10% I thought we saw, and not the original.
remember, I mean,
Yeah,
So
do it.
anyway, I'd say take it off or decide.
What's the general purpose behind other ordinances including it? Is it just for aesthetics? Is it a health and safety issue? Is it just,
I think.
we're designing for it?
I think it is all of the above.
Okay.
It would, okay, if you would talk to, I'm sure, any RV park owner, they would say, I need a little space for someone to sit in our little picnic chairs and have a swing for the kids. They'd be silly not to. Our point was, we want you to have some of that, but we're not gonna tell you how much and what should be in it, kind of thing. So if you're saying there's no point in telling them that, I suppose they could build it without it, and people who stay there could go, well, this was a nice park, except there was no place to sit.
There's no dog yard, or there's no
Yeah.
grass, or there's no picnic table, so.
So,
So I think you either need to say how much, and then when you do a land use clearance, decide, did you set aside 10% for
that's-
this new RV park? Or-
that's what,
I think we're getting into something that really, if you're going to have some kind of green space set aside with a boundary, that needs to be from Chris, because there's so much litigation right now in this state over landscaping and green space and what you can require. I think,
I think it's good to take it out.
and that's fine, but if we're going to do something, we probably don't need to spend the time on percentage or discussion on how to define it, like Chris defined it in a legal way, or take it out, so.
well, is the consensus take it out? Am I seeing some people kind of nod or not nod, or we got some negatives? Okay, we will not take it out, we will leave it for discussion. Okay, good.
And then what about F, buffers not limited to walls and fences are required along the perimeter? So we're gonna have to define, you have a definition for buffer,
Yep, we did.
but how are you gonna enforce that?
On the
Let's see.
LUC, they gotta show us what they're gonna do.
But let's see what the buffer
Buffer
choices are.
is a structure or area provided to reduce the conflict between two different uses. Buffers may consist of fencing, walls, landscaping, roads, or land set aside to separate particular uses.
Okay, so that'll be okay,
That's
because
fine.
you can have a road, a driveway go around and that's satisfies.
You could, yeah, as long as you're protecting your neighbors in some,
And if we're
Distance.
thinking we're gonna knock off at 3, we have roughly 15 minutes,
okay.
so.
Madam Chair, did you want to keep going, or would you like to, where are we? We're almost there.
Page 5.
5, 6, 7, so,
It's site plan stuff, and I think all of that's kind of standard.
oh, yeah, okay, so that, exactly. So now if you look at number 7, for the site plan submittals, all we said here is, if you submit all this stuff to us, you got to show us all we told you to do. And so this is mostly boilerplate, I guess is the word I would use. This is if you're going to give us your LUC to do, your submission to do an RV park, give us everything. And I think that's all on there. The bottom was the violations, enforcement, and penalties, and that always goes through legal. So I think we could stop there if you'd like.
I
And
think so, yeah, and depending on our timeline and stuff, it sounds like maybe next step would be for planning and zoning to have a work session to update the draft so that can then be shared before the
Okay.
public hearing.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. This is exactly what we needed from you guys.
Just real quickly on number 8,
Yep,
page 7 on violation.
yep.
That needs a lot of work, and we'll just kick that to Chris,
That's
because the mayor is
exactly.
not gonna knock on your door, the mayor is not gonna decide to tow it, because we have nowhere to store it, we have to protect it, we have to do everything else, and we all circle back to enforcement, so I don't want an unenforceable,
Yep.
and, it depends on who you elect next time around, that you get a real enforcer as the mayor towing vehicles.
Comes to the
Okay, so, do we wanna go quickly to the
subdivision.
touch on the subdivision?
Yes. So, I don't know if we need to, do you want us to pull it up to share it, or just give you an update on that process?
You could share it while we update.
It's only 30 pages long.
Yeah, it's only 30 pages. Do you need me to send it to you?
I'll just go find it really fast.
So, we are on our second draft of editing the subdivision ordinance that I believe needs to be approved by the end of November. They've been really responsive to tailoring the subdivision requests to things that are appropriate in Bluff. Like, for example, they took out the requirement that your subdivisions need to be fully green grass lawns. And so we're still
Nice.
working through some things like that, like making sure, like talking through whether subdivisions, roads need to be paved or not. We are going to be inviting the Hanson Group to our next meeting on the 17th? 16th. With the hopes that that is our final request for changes from them, after which they would send us a draft that we would take to public hearing. I think, generally speaking, because they're providing a template that is based on best practices, we don't anticipate a lot of feedback from the town council, but there were a couple questions about like the appeals process enforcement we want to make sure that you have your eyes on. But I kind of think that's all I wanted to share today. What would you?
I would just say that, as Amanda mentioned, so much of this is coming down to us from the state. We don't have a lot we can change. With regard to submission and process, none of that is really changeable. It's coming down from above, which is actually fine, because then they can't argue with us. It's right there. And Amanda's right. There are just things to talk about, like, so it all, they typically say right there, hey, you must do curb, gutter, and sidewalk throughout your subdivision. We've never had that, we never will. However, do we want to? Do we want to say to new subdivisions, you should be ready for curb, gutter, and sidewalk, because, it would help our drainage and our pedestrian safety? I don't know, I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying those are things that we're beginning to sort of take out because we never had them, but we want to remember that we're planning for the future. So,
And lighting,
lighting
That
always,
was
we've
one
got
of
it,
them.
we've got dark sky ordinance written 50
right,
times. and-
but the ones that to require lighting.
Right,
you
that's
know,
what we
so-
said. So we said, okay, we don't want streetlights throughout your subdivision, but if you have to have safety lighting at an intersection or something, it has to be.
Well, and you just,
dark
I
sky
think you
lights.
switched it to just say if a light was put up, it had to meet
Right,
dark
it
sky
has to
stuff.
meet,
So-
exactly.
But they took out where it said streetlights were required.
Exactly. That's what we're trying to do, is catch anything that is not
Not
bluff. But anyway, so that's where we are in the process.
And that draft isn't on our site yet.
That's what I was gonna ask, and I probably missed something.
No,
missed something,
it's
but-
not ready to be on the site.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Just let me know when it is, and it is
pretty lengthy, but that's a good like educational moment for the public that, you know, a lot of this is being passed down through the legislature, so. But yeah, let me know when it is, I'll get it.
And they wanna toss out ours and put in the new one, so this one,
Correct.
but this one's, the old one's pretty close on a lot of things.
Well, process is always, process doesn't, process gets updated and changes based on legalese and legal input. So the legislature definitely changed some of that. And then the actual proposal or draft we were given is from people used to working with cities. And so, you know, we get the whole thing, and we're a small town.
So just scanning this, and I haven't looked at this recently, but like archaeological resources is not in the new one.
It's not, I don't think.
And maybe it doesn't need to be, but I'm just saying we should probably compare them and see what's been X'd.
I was gonna say, is that something that the consultants or you are able to provide from a high level as to like what these changes are?
From our existing one to this, to the one they submitted as a draft?
Or I don't know if council thinks that's important.
I think it's important to know what the comparative changes are and what are required versus ones that we wanted to put in. But what I'm wondering, yeah, I'm just looking at the time because we did say we'd end at 3, and I'm fine with going till midnight, but I don't think anybody else will want to do that.
Can we have a break?
I would suggest that we focus on one particular piece. We've got a subdivision ordinance that has a deadline, and we have the RV, which would be nice to roll off everybody's list. So is it feasible to do the public hearing for both of those at the same time?
I think so.
And so the drop dead on the subdivision is November 30th?
I thought it was December, but I can't say.
In one of the
when-
meetings, he said November 30th.
But
I
he
haven't
also
heard any
mentioned that the
updates.
legislature was still
Changing.
doing things.
So-
Maybe when you email these guys, we could get a good answer from timing and such? Oh, you think you see
Does
it?
it have it on the
Hit.
league site?
I'm trying to look it up right now.
Oh, the League of Towns and Cities?
December 31st, 2024.
Is current.
December 31st.
Okay, well, that's what they said at first, and then they bumped it back to November 30th. So,
I can check.
When you email the Hansons, just put that in there and go, okay, we're aiming for December 31st, are we good? Because that would give us that extra
Well,
week or two.
but December is a hard time to get.
No, it
hearings.
is, but I mean, if we could get everything done between now and Thanksgiving and then vote the final draft, you guys would be voting to accept by your first meeting December, then boom, the holidays.
So if you still aim, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, okay,
Okay.
put the date question in. But I think a public hearing for the two of them would be great, and just have it, just run it as two separate subjects would be great.
So the Hanson group is coming to your next meeting?
We hope the
We hope,
16th.
okay.
That's,
And that would probably be really helpful for those of us on the council to attend or at least listen to after the fact. Probably attend so that we can hear it and ask any questions that we have. Because I don't think we want to spend, on something that's so boilerplated and mandated, that we want to spend a work session of 2 or 3 or 4 hours going over everything.
Yeah.
Might be best to just be able to be there.
they've been really good at sitting and talking, at our meetings. They've gone, no, put this in, no, we'll take that out. They've been good about responding. I
On
think
a
they've
live,
worked.
a live document that.
Yeah, they've
is-
been just really good about working with us on that. So if you guys were there, is it a joint meeting you could do?
I mean, we
We'd
could,
just probably just notice it as all of us being there and then
Yeah,
if we can
that way-
participate.
Okay.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I think that would probably be really helpful for those people who can attend. Like I said, 3 we don't need to
Wednesday,
deal
the
with right
16th.
now, it has a deadline, but 3 is gonna have a moving deadline because they're adding drones and gliders and a whole bunch of other stuff apparently to that.
Madam Mayor, did you notice my question about the county having put an overlay zone already?
I did,
Is that
thank you.
something you're gonna
Yeah,
find out?
I'm gonna
already?
follow up on that.
Okay, great. It just, because I'd be willing to make that phone call, but I wanted you to.
Well, if you're willing to make it, Marcia, I would be happy to have you do that.
Okay, I was, that's why I didn't want to step in it, but
No.
if we passed as the county an overlay zone on airports, then the overlay zone exists, and we would only have to bump it up to whatever's added to it.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind me making a phone call, I'm happy to do so.
Not at all. I think that would be great.
Okay.
And then, as I said, 4 and 5, we kind of talked about 4 in terms of doing the public hearings for the ordinances. I think we have a consensus to do one large public hearing on 2 ordinances. And that, we can agree to that date as soon as planning and zoning says we're ready to do it.
Sometimes it works for us to just proactively set the date so that we meet it.
Okay?
Because it also takes a while to notice it, so I wonder if we wanna look at like first week of December or something.
Wait, public hearing first,
Yeah.
or November? First,
Oh, well, I guess it depends on when we have
If-
to figure out the deadline first, I guess.
But if you get it
Hanson-
done, I'd just get it done if
Yeah,
after
if
your
Hanson
16th.
can meet with us on the 16th, will they then have time to give us a working draft so that Erin can notice it for first week of November? Oh, I don't know, maybe Tuesday the 5th or something. And we have and then we'd have a couple of weeks to fix whatever we heard.
I don't think we would have the draft early enough for the public to have enough time to review it.
Okay,
Maybe we're looking at mid-November public
for the
hearing.
public hearing. Okay, okay. So November 15th, give or take a minute. What's our second meeting in November? Let's do it for that meeting, as a public hearing.
Or would it be the 20th?
Be the
First.
20th.
It's the 20th, but Ann and I are out of town.
Oh,
So what about the
mastermind.
The 13th is,
13th is work.
Yeah, I can't do the 13th.
Okay.
well, you guys going out of town, which day do you pick?
We leave on Tuesday the 19th and wouldn't be back until the evening of the 21st
Of November?
of November.
So then let's do it earlier in November?
Right.
Or could we shoot for Monday the 18th? Or is that
That's
too much
kind
for
of
the two?
tight.
Do what?
Monday the 18th?
And what was wrong with Friday the 15th?
Friday's hard to
Fridays.
have
I can't.
meetings. People leave town for
We have a
Fridays.
Neil Young concert.
That's my birthday. I can't. I just
That was
can't
a-
do that.
We'd have
I
cake.
can't have public comment on that.
Okay, what
He's
about-
really
I'm just
old.
kidding, I'm just kidding.
What about the 14th? It's a Thursday.
It's fine.
I'm not available I'm basically not available that week.
Okay. Monday the, what was that?
18th.
Monday the 18th? Anybody?
Does Monday the 18th work for you, Aaron and Ann?
I believe we're still in town.
You haven't left. Would you just say?
Saturday.
What about the 25th?
They're
Is that too
gone.
late?
That's
Thanksgiving
Thanksgiving
week.
Well, it's
Thanksgiving week.
Thanksgiving week, but it's Monday.
It doesn't work for.
Public comment, we want as many people to attend as want to attend.
Right. And they can submit in writing too? Is that-
Always.
So you have to allow 10 days for that? After the
Yes.
hearing?
I won't be here the 25th.
Okay.
We've
So-
already booked tickets to,
Okay, what about December 2nd?
Well, but see, you're running into time after and
Right,
voting
right,
on it.
time.
So what if we go back a little in November?
Yeah, November
Because
8th,
if you're,
10th.
if you do, we don't really know if he'll give you sort of the final draft on the 16th.
Let's
So you
pick
can
let's
post it.
pick a day and have Amanda's email say, here's a basic outline of our schedule. Does this work with you? Could you do it that way and see if he says, whoa, 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 don't.
What
you know.
about Wednesday, the 30th of October? 2 weeks after, and you can post it ahead of the meeting with Hanson.
No, because we wouldn't be able to post it 10 days in advance.
Post the
Yeah.
notice or post the draft?
The draft.
Both. You want the notice and the draft to be available at the same time.
Well, it
You
would be if you posted it on the 16th or 17th, that
don't-
still
Well,
gives
the
you.
16th is our meeting, so
Yeah,
they
so if
can't-
you posted the 17th, you'd get 2 weeks.
No, but we're not gonna get
He's-
the final draft from
he
him by
won't,
then.
if we talk to him on the 16th, it's gonna take them about a week perhaps
Another-
to get us that.
What was the
Yeah.
issue with Monday, November 18th? What's that?
You guys might not be here.
It was just
Oh,
about
but we're here.
overloading you
Okay.
guys, yeah. That's all.
Monday, November 18th.
Yeah.
That gives you time, gives us time to notice, and it gives us time to get that other one cleaned up. And it will fall approximately 10 days, but don't hold me to it, to your meeting on November 6th. So you'll have another chance. Good?
Yeah, if
Monday,
you're gonna- if you and
November
Ann-
We
you are the
should still
ones-
be in, I think we leave on Tuesday, because that appointment is Wednesday the 20th, right? Great, okay,
So excited.
thrilled.
Great week.
Yeah, it's gonna be the best week ever. Okay, perfect, and then we'll do a regular evening public hearing, I'm sure.
Correct.
We'll figure out the time, okay,
6 o'clock is,
something like
you
that.
know, the-
Yeah, and I think on the, particularly with the RV one, we should plan that we will have public comment.
Sure,
So-
sure. We'd like to hear public comment for things we missed or things we overstepped.
Okay.
So just one quick thing on the other is that, thank you very much to Aaron for catching the fact that Bluff was not included in the early voting or voting ballot box by San Juan County. And as you'll see today, we now have the ballot box, and we will be listed on the website as having a voting spot, and we will have 2 early voting days in Bluff. When Aaron caught it, and then I talked with Mac McDonald, the next day we got a call immediately getting everything in place. I'm suspecting that calling the Lieutenant Governor's office perhaps assisted in moving this along. So spread the word, we have a ballot box, it's back in the back, people can drop their ballots off, and we'll do a public posting, it's the 10th and the 17th.
10th and the 17th, those are both Thursdays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They will be here in the gym with the machine for early voting. I shouldn't say machine, sorry. Early voting will take place the 10th and the 17th, 10 to 2.
And we hopefully will have a machine here the day of the election, but that's still being negotiated. When Lyman Duncan dropped off the machine today, he told me he would pick up the ballot box, he told me he would pick it up the day before the election, and I told him that was not acceptable. We would need it through the election, so they'll pick it up at 8 p.m. on election day.
But we need to talk about that offline, but I would recommend, if you are planning to wait until after 5 p.m. on election day to vote, as we've seen in many elections past, our intention is to have a box here. That is our intention. Whether the higher powers have that intention is up in the air. So if you're planning to vote on election day, vote earlier than day rather than later, because otherwise you might be rerouted to another location. But again, we will fight tooth and nail to make sure that people have access to those boxes for as long as possible. Thanks for working with us. It's always a treat, so.
It's 3:04 p.m.
I move to adjourn the work session between planning and zoning and the town council.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It's unanimous. I'm turning off the recorder.
And it's
and-
what, 3, is it already
3:04.